Welcome to the Careering Podcast, a collection of rants and reckons on all things career, hosted by author and creator of Careering 9, Melissa Davies, and her partner in crime, Kelsey Ingalls. If you're brave enough, take a seat, settle in and listen as we tackle difficult career and workplace issues. Sometimes we'll be wrong, sometimes we'll be right, but we will deliver it with confidence and a touch of colourful language, so it will at least be entertaining. Welcome back to the Careering Podcast. Thank you for coming back. It's me, Melissa Davies, with my partner in crime, Kelsey Ingalls. And Kelsey, I'm keen to hear what your theme of the week is.
Oh, we're just cracking into it, straight into it this week. Yeah. My theme of the week is I'm enjoying being a little bit more high level rather than like day drinking. So my theme of the week is about being comfortable playing in the grey, and that I was listening to the end of Michelle Obama's book Becoming, and just how much she had these amazing things happen and these really terrible things happen all at the same time, and how much she just had to deal with things that weren't black and white, and that in our daily lives a lot of stuff isn't just good or bad or black or white, that it is all the things in between, and it can be all of those things all at once. And I think this week my theme is just accepting both of them and just being in it and not having to make a definitive judgment this way or that way. That's my theme of the week.
Nice. Sounds like you've had 2 6-hour card.
Yeah, there was a lot of audio. There was a lot of audio books listened to in the last 4 days. So hey, look, it's great. Good thinking time.
Yeah, that sounds like a good attitude. I think I'm going to lean into that this week too. Thank you.
What's your theme of the week? Are you going high level like me?
I'm just a bit loved up with my friends at the moment.
Oh, that's a bit cute.
Yeah, I've had a really awesome weekend catching up with friends from Sydney, and the two of them, they're both just amazing people with big hearts and super smart, and I love their relationship, and they're such good friends to me independently and as a couple. I love hanging out with them. And then I've got a couple of other really good friends who have allowed me to support them while they're going through some stuff, and they're people that I absolutely call and sob down the phone to or rant at when I'm a bit frustrated with life. So it's actually been really nice to be allowed to support them while they're going through some stuff. So yeah, I'm just feeling really happy with the quality of people in my life right now. So yeah.
Amazing.
One of those friends actually messaged me and said she can't wait to car jam to Baby Shark with me. So she's getting elevated in the friend rankings.
Like, she is more than welcome to. I actually, on my long car drives, I was car jamming at one point, and I was like, if Melissa could see me now. Yes. It wasn't Baby Shark, but I definitely had a wee car jam in the middle of the Lewis Pass. Right, and on that note, what are we talking about this week?
We've got a big topic this week, actually, and it's one that, while we've struggled to spell it, we certainly know how to say it, and we've sure as hell all experienced it, and that is misogyny.
Yeah, I really struggle to spell it.
Yeah, it's like miso soup and then gynae.
Misogyny.
Misogyny. Okay,
good. I'm going to remember that when I'm putting the podcast together. Yeah.
Yeah, but interestingly, it actually comes from an old English, a Greek word, which was actually misos, meaning hatred, and gyne, which means woman. And unfortunately, the textbook definition of misogyny was a deep hatred of women. And it has been broadened, we've gone from, some nice light fun stuff into the heavy stuff right now. But actually, in the 1970s is when the word started to get a resurgence and become really well known. But since then, now, in 2002, the Oxford Dictionary actually changed it from hatred of women to hatred or dislike of or prejudice against women. And so the way we would talk about misogyny in this podcast, and I guess in general, is not just that deep hatred, but a much broader sense of sexism and dislike or disadvantaging women.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what was interesting for me when I didn't realise that, I hear the term getting thrown around and I didn't realise it had such a strong origin. What was the
difference between misogyny and sexism and sort of the origin of the words?
Yeah, because I've always used the terms interchangeably, and because nowadays it's accepted across most platforms that they are ultimately the same. And interestingly, I wanted to make sure that we were really clear on other words for misogyny or what it was like. So, because I'm a nerd, looked to the thesaurus. What's another word for misogyny? Chauvinism, objectification, prejudice, sexism, inequality, bigotry, etc. So, the sentiment doesn't matter what label you put on it. The sentiment is.
It is a grateful woman. Is basically the gist of it.
Yeah, it's not cool. Not cool. Did you have a take on the word or as how it and sexism relate or anything like that?
I think I knew that misogyny was originally a lot more of a harsher term than sexism, but I think it's interesting to know that the Oxford Dictionary has updated its definition, because I feel like we use it more often. And also it's really hard to tell when you've got a sexist aggression towards you or a microaggression towards you, whether it's coming from hatred or just coming from ignorance. Yeah. Either way, it sucks on the receiving end of it. And I think, and especially in this context at work, it all is just hard work on a female's end.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we talk about women, I guess is the other definition, is that when we talk about women, it is anyone identifying as a woman.
Yeah.
Anyone that identifies in that space.
Yeah, totally.
For this context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to keep stating that, because in our minds that's how it is.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we let others know that's our value set, is that anyone identifying as a woman is a woman for both of us.
Yeah. And especially in this conversation.
Yeah, and I think just to frame this conversation up, we know that there are other identities and races and other belief systems that get treated with hatred and prejudice, etc. For this conversation, we wanted to just focus on the gender-based segregation
at work.
Yeah. So we're really outraged about all the other stuff, and you'd be listening to us for a good few days.
Yeah. It'd be an 8-hour-long podcast on all the rest of it. So let's just focus in today on misogyny/sexism at work.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the topic. I'm nervous about what your question is, because you always fire a question at me. Hit me with it.
What would be an example of misogyny in the workplaces you've seen, either experienced or observed?
It was really interesting, because in the prep for this conversation, we talked about how I actually didn't experience it until, or I didn't realise it or see it around me until I was kind of in my second or third job. It wasn't until sort of like my mid-20s that I had direct experiences with it. And probably one of the first ones that really stood out to me was a client came in. It was the first time that I'd ever met him. He had taken over from another person, and I loved working with that person. I loved working on this brand, on this work. And he sat in this meeting room with me, and he spent the whole time shifting his gaze between my eyes and my cleavage. Eyes, cleavage, eyes, cleavage, eyes, cleavage. And I just couldn't hide myself enough to feel comfortable in that space. And it was so demeaning. Oh my God, I just felt like any bit of intelligence was worth nothing, because all he wanted to do was stare at my chest. And I think because I am a fat woman, I've really struggled. I don't often get objectified visually for myself, and not something that I recognize. And this is one of the first things that first times I've ever identified it and just went, I can't work with this, man. I do not want to deal with this at all. And credit to one of the ladies that I worked with, who was an older woman, and she was like, fucking give him to me, I'll tell him what's what. And she stepped in and looked after me and just took on the client. And I was like, I just can't. I feel so gross and so demeaned and so, nah, I'm not doing it. And she was like, I'm ready. Send me in. I was so grateful for it. So that was my first big one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And because there's almost an implied power imbalance too.
Yeah.
Because he's the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was just like, all of this situation is to make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just never had anything to do with him again. And it was and the woman that took it over, she was great. I really appreciated her for that.
Yeah, that's awesome that you had an ally and someone who was willing to put you in a safe place. And was comfortable dealing with someone like that, because that's not easy.
No. And someone that had obviously, she was older than me. obviously someone that had experienced enough of her own shit in her lifetime. Like, I think back to that situation now, and I think now I'd be like, I'm sorry, have I got something on my chest? Sorry, are you... Like, I'd feel far more confident standing up for myself now.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I think it was just such this, like, I just hadn't ever experienced it before, and it was... Or, like... I wasn't aware of it before.
Yeah.
And that was shocking. That was a hard one for me. What about you?
Oh, I just wanted to unpack a couple of things in that, though. I think the first thing that was awesome is that you recognise that you felt uncomfortable and you listened to yourself enough to raise it with somebody.
Yeah.
Because you also said that you undermined your intellect, and so your confidence would have no doubt been impacted too. So I think if you leave an interaction with somebody in the workplace and you don't feel good about yourself, that's probably the first red flag to be like, hey, I'm just going to have a chat to one of my colleagues about this, because it was lucky that you did both of those things. You recognised it and had a conversation.
And I was working in a workplace that was so supportive and such a safe space to share something like that. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that someone would step up and go, that's not fucking on, we're not having that.
Yeah.
Like, it was so easy to share because the environment was good in that space.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the situation wasn't awesome. But awesome that you had a culture at your workplace where you could talk about those things.
Yeah.
And people supported you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example of overt misogyny, because I think what was interesting for me doing my prep was I was sitting here going, well, there's overt, there's covert, and then there's casual.
Yeah.
And so like casual sexism, casual racism, you know, those things exist and they're almost laughed off because we see them in joke form.
Yeah.
And one of the examples actually that stands out for me is actually more on the casual end, because I think when I think about the overt stuff, you know, I was a female refereeing men's rugby. I did a mechanical engineering trade and worked selling welding products. So I was used to direct overt sexism all of the time.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a cool story about that. There was one time when I was working in retail selling industrial engineering and welding products, and I was the only female there. I had all male colleagues and they were all busy doing other things, so I was the only person in the showroom and the retail counter, and this client walked in and he had a TIG welding torch over his shoulder, and he asked me if one of the boys was around to help him, and I'd just finished a certificate in TIG welding at Polytech, so I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I could help this guy, and I was, again, a super nerd, and, you know, had spent a lot of time learning our products and stuff, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess I can get one of the guys for you. So I went out the back and got one of my male colleagues, and he came out. I told him what had happened. The guy had asked to speak to a guy, and so Mark came out, and Mark goes, I hear you need to talk to someone with a penis. And I was like, oh my God. And I was probably 19 at the time. And,
yes.
and I was absolutely shaken, because I was like, I have never seen someone. And Mark had a really great demeanour and jokey and fun, and maybe I shouldn't have said his name. But it was awesome the way he handled it. And the guy was like, oh no, mate, it's just that I really, you know, got a bit of a technical problem and I need someone who really knows what they're doing. And Mark goes, well, I don't know why you didn't ask her. She's more qualified than all of us put together. But cool. Let me muddle my way through it, and then when we get real stuck, I'll ask her for help.
I love that. That's the best way to handle it.
It was awesome. And in the end, Mark helped the guy, and then he actually could help the guy. It wasn't actually that difficult. And the next day, the guy comes running in with a box of chocolates and goes, I'm real sorry about yesterday for being a dick. And my wife's in the car and she's really embarrassed for my behaviour. And it was just gorgeous. And I said,
amazing.
Yeah, it was really cute, because I was like, I love that you showed up to have a conversation with me. And he goes, yeah, I know, I realised what I did wrong, and I just made an assumption that the young girl wouldn't be able to help me, and I'm really embarrassed.
And didn't double down and behave like a dick and think that it was everyone else's problem, because I guess that's the amazing thing about Mark is that he didn't give a shit what that guy's reaction was. Where I think as a lot of women, we get told that we're too emotional. If we react to something like that, we get told we're too emotional. I didn't mean it like that. But like the reaction and the doubling down is so much worse.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to have that conversation.
Yeah, so true. And I think I was really lucky. What I noticed is those guys I worked with, all of those men got more offended than I did, because I know that we all have these biases. We all do it. We can be as open-minded as we like, but we all have these these biases that we don't even...
cultural biases that we grow up with. And norms we grow up with.
Yes, yeah. And interestingly, that was what the research was showing me around misogyny. It's deeply based on gender stereotypes over the last few, 100 years. Well, no, going back beyond that. But yeah, so I guess I thought I'd talk about the covert ones rather than the overt ones, the casual ones.
Yeah. And it's always so much harder to bring the covert ones up.
Yeah.
It's that microaggression stuff, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
One, it's how do you handle that situation with that person? So how do you even have that conversation? But two, is it worth it for your day-to-day to bring up that conversation with that person that is, hey, you're leaving your coffee cups in the meeting room at the end of every meeting because you assume one of the ladies in the office is going to pick up after you. Yeah. Put your fucking coffee cup in the fucking kitchen. Yeah. Like, just stuff like that where they've got an administrator at home, so they assume they've got one at work.
But also the office sign that goes up says your mother doesn't work here, so clean up after yourself. Yeah. So again, there's this implied societal norm that the woman at home does the picking up and looks after the kids and looks after the family. It's like, wash your own fucking dishes.
I worked with someone who, because amazingly, one of the places that I worked with, we had a roundtable conversation with all of the like senior women and just went, how are we experiencing it in the workplace at the moment? Like, what are we all aware of?
Wow.
And like listening to all the women have different experiences of it. And one of the girls goes, have you ever noticed that I deliberately only empty the dishwasher about once a week? Maybe less than that, maybe once a fortnight. She goes, I made a conscious choice because how many of us every day will empty the dishwasher versus the men in this office? And we all just went, fuck. And so it's our own internalized misogyny and internalized biases that put us in those situations too, because we carry that own weight in our own life, so we just kind of run it through at work as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's there's so much evidence around that women are the ones that clean up the kitchens, clean up the boardrooms after meetings, bring in baking on people's birthdays. Yeah, there's definitely.
Yeah, I've had a few work environments where, and I think this is a great time to go, this is not all men.
Yeah.
This is very, very clear that we are not talking about all men. Like my work environments that I've been in recently and in other years where the dudes are the ones that will absolutely not have a problem emptying the dishwasher, will clean up the kitchen, will have a rant about someone leaving the soggy dishcloth in the sink. Like, it's not every situation, but I can tell you that every woman will probably be able to give you a situation where they've had to experience it in the workplace in some form or another.
Yeah, so there's some evidence around those gender-based microaggressions. So 32% of women said that interrupted, 29% have been told they're too emotional, 25% have been told to change in some way to be taken more seriously. 29% also said a co-worker has mansplained to them, and 28% have had a male co-worker take credit for their idea. And this is not all men, but there are some deep examples of where women are silenced more so than men. And, I recently, in 2022, had a client example where the client absolutely mansplained to me an engineering process without realising that I worked for 13 years in that environment. And
oh, little does he know.
I was like, because I understand this, and I'm like, well, this person isn't someone who I'm in a position to have a good dialogue with. If it was a colleague that I had to see regularly or someone I had to work with ongoing, I probably would have had a conversation with them. But it really, it actually surprised me that there was still this kind of mindset out there.
Especially when you surround yourself with a certain level of person.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're thrown into a situation that might be out of the norm and you're just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, this still fucking exists. Like, I once had a client who refused to communicate with me. So I was lead on the job, lead on everything. When I first met him, I met him with the owner of the business. And so that relationship was there. But I would send him emails and go, I need this, we need to do this, this is the plan, blah, blah, blah. He'd email back, CC in the owner and go, hi, insert owner's name here, here's all the information that you need. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, just the overtness of it. And again, luckily it was an environment where I could go, the fuck is this shit? And the owner go, yeah, he's a fucking dickhead. Like, being able to be in that environment is makes it a little bit easier, but it doesn't stop you from experiencing it. And you certainly can't have especially when you've got a client dynamic, you can't exactly have that conversation.
Oh, and it's so... they're based on old school gender stereotypes, and unfortunately that's where they kind of say, you know, misogyny is deeply rooted in that industrial era 9 to 5 workday.
Yeah.
Men go to work and other providers, and women are at home. So I you know, a lot of it is unconscious, but moments like that are conscious. Like that was a conscious choice not to email you, not to engage with you,
especially when the owner wasn't in the email chain and I was directly communicating with him. I was just like, what's wrong with you, sir? But as a 20, especially with young women, I think a lot of the stuff, when I really started to notice it, was like in my mid-20s, and just going, and being called the girls.
It's that unfortunately reminds me of those kind of, that's the casual sexism stuff where it's not meant with harm.
And they say it with a funny tone.
Yes.
So if you say anything about it, you're emotional and you're overreacting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You've given us 2 really good examples about working in workspaces where you've had a safe place to talk about these things. I had one of the areas I think that's really interesting to talk about is that kind of casual sexism, like the jokes and the comments like, oh, you throw like a girl, or, you know, those kind of things that people across the spectrum of gender will say without even realising it because they're so deeply in our subconscious and in our culture.
And they know that it'll get a laugh from the people around them because you're in an environment that supports that.
Yeah, or even things like, oh, that's not very ladylike.
Yeah.
And, oh, women drivers. Yeah. You know, there's all these things, and women say it too, right? And other gender identifying as well. So it's not, we all do it, right? And what was quite interesting is when I was in this role at Wesfarmers, I'd been invited out. So by this stage, I'd spent 15 years working in industrial engineering organisations, often in remote parts of Australia, often the only female, usually the only one under 40. And growing up from, you know, as we know, farm girl from Southbridge, we know I'm not afraid of a swear word or a drink. And
doesn't sound like a safe environment, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. None of it worried me going into those environments.
Is that because you hadn't experienced sexism in the workplace beforehand, or just like, I can handle myself, I'll be fine?
I think I had 13 years with BOC where the behaviours were much more professional.
Right,
so I didn't
you had
really
an expectation level.
Yeah, and I'd been treated with respect, and I'd been given amazing opportunities, and age and gender were never a barrier, and I didn't see those same behaviours until I went. But I worked at the head office for the most part, so it was a lot. It was professional people in professional roles. It was quite different when I would go out to
the back socialise Australia.
Yeah, or socialising with the sales team, and they'd have a sales function, and they'd want to go to a strip joint afterwards. Like that was still happening, you know. And yeah, it was, and I was like, the fuck. Anyway, what was interesting for me was at Wesfarmers, where it was way more direct, but it was way more consistent. And there was one example where we went out for dinner, and there was me and some general managers from the regional general managers and a few of their direct reports. So, you know, managing director, their direct reports, and their direct reports. So quite senior level people within an organisation.
Yeah.
And it was really common that people would get really boozy and say jokes, and, you know, the workforce was less than 20% female, and this one particular situation, a joke was told, and the joke was really offensive. Not to me personally, I guess I didn't find it funny, but I wasn't offended by it. But what it made me realise is that I wouldn't have felt comfortable if any of my female direct reports had been in that environment.
So you would have protected them, but you didn't protect yourself.
Yeah, because I was like, I guess I've been around long enough to know there's no offence meant. I don't like that joke. I'm probably going to talk to this person one-on-one, directly, separately. He was probably 7 whiskies deep by this stage. And I was like, it's not the right time to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But it made me, for the first time, go, I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that other young women were in this environment. And so I decided to have an informal chat with our HR director and just said, how do we tackle this? Like, you know, we do have a male-dominated organisation and a culture that's pretty aggressive, and I think there's examples like this that make it unsafe for young people, really.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty confronting.
But that also behaviour is accepted because of the culture that it's in.
Yeah, and it's just perpetuated. He was a terrible HR director.
Oh, no.
He rang the person that told the joke and made that person ring and apologise to me.
Oh, no.
So this was a confidential conversation about cultural change, and it became, Melissa's complaining that you told a dirty joke at dinner.
Context.
I was like, what the... When the guy rang me, I was like, hey, I'm surprised to hear from you. And he's like, oh, no, I've just been speaking to the HR director and I'm really sorry that I upset you. And I was like, hey, no, this is time out. Let me give you the context. And I told him, and he goes, oh my God, you're so right. I never thought about how those behaviours wouldn't be acceptable to other people coming in. And just because we've always done it that way, he was amazing. Had great conversation. But then it made me go, I don't trust the HR team. Who can I talk to about this?
And how do I have a say? If something worse happens, what then happens? And if you're questioning that, how is that for every younger female or just general employee in that organisation? So
bad. Hence, I left. This is literally the organisation where they told me to grab one of the Aboriginal staff and go to a conference on diversity. So I resigned.
My God.
Actually, I got made redundant around the time I was about to resign, so it worked out beautifully for everybody. But that was the culture, and I was like, this is terrible. This goes against everything I believe in. This is disgusting. And so I think the reason I wanted to tell that story or share that story was because what can seem harmless, this joke or this comment, this throwaway comment, it wasn't okay. And if you don't have a safe workplace and you raise it, like, what do you do? And I think, that's where I thought about, that's what's so important for us to have this conversation. So we can remind ourselves and others that if we see those things, we have to call them out when we see them and do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, or find someone to help us do that.
Yeah.
Like, I think back to that situation with the guy, like, overtly staring at my chest to make me feel uncomfortable. Like, I think that's, for that story, just for full context, in that environment, it wasn't just a sneaky peek. It was disgusting, and it was done on purpose, and it was his personality and just who he was. But I think having people around us and finding those safe people is really important, as well as us making sure that we are laying the groundwork and calling things out for those that come after us.
Yeah.
Is really important.
Or leave.
Yeah. Get the fuck out of there. You don't have to put up with that shit.
Yeah. That's so shit.
I've got a friend who was once told that she really needed to figure out, she really needed to change what she was wearing at work because it was making... it wasn't great for the men around her, and she would never get a promotion if she was dressing like that. And, like, this was a year ago. It wasn't ages ago. She's, like, in her 30s. And I'm just sitting there going, how belittling, one, how belittling, two, if you're getting fucking distracted in this massive organisation by a 30-something-year-old girl wearing pencil skirt and a tights, you've got a fucking problem, mate. That isn't about her. That is about you.
Yeah.
But she didn't have anyone around her that found that unreasonable when she went to search for that person to have that conversation with. And I just wanted to go in there and be like, fuck all of you. You're all idiots.
Yes, and it's so interesting because there's two sides to this in terms of one is around what's appropriate to wear to work. And, if she was turning up in a bikini top and denim shorts, I'd be like, okay, I can see that it might not be appropriate for knowing...
If you're not working in a beach bar, probably not appropriate.
Yeah, because I know the nature of work that she did. So I'm going, maybe not appropriate. And most companies will have some kind of dress policy.
Yeah, but she, because it was so unreasonable and she was so shocked by it, and she took a photo of what she was wearing and she showed me, and I was like, I've seen people wear far less to work. Yeah. What the fuck? It was awful.
And interestingly, what gender was her boss?
Female.
Yeah, so this internalized misogyny is often shown by women too. And I read this really good article by this 14-year-old female identifying person called Ella Dameron. And she said, have you ever felt judged by another girl because you weren't acting as a stereotypical girl does? Or maybe you've heard women dissing other women for being single or wearing provocative clothing. She also it was awesome actually. She then gave this great quote by a CNN commentator who said, using sexism is also the laziest way to demean a woman, because if you can't debate her ideas, just slam her appearance, her personality, her relationships, and her likability.
So true.
Yeah. But that, you know, like the whole pick-me girl culture.
Yeah. Like, I'm one of the guys. Especially when another woman tells someone else that they're getting emotional. I'm like, don't do that. That's lazy. That's fucking awful. Anger is also an emotion, and we see it in most of the men that we work with.
Kels, I think we see it in us.
I'm fucking angry right now. I am emotional.
That's why this podcast is our rants and reckons.
Exactly. I'm emotional and I'm proud of it.
So what happened with her?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Does she still work there?
I think so.
Yeah. That's tough.
Because that's the thing is, like, this stuff, no one teaches you how to deal with it.
No. We don't talk about this stuff.
No, we don't talk about it. And no one teaches you how to deal with it. No one teaches you how to bring it up in a constructive way. Like the stuff that you were talking about, the men that you've talked to about it have been so deeply reasonable. That's the exception, not the rule.
I don't know. I personally have found if I show up to have a difficult conversation, I'm prepared and I'm ready to stay in dialogue. And I play, you know, I don't know if you've heard the saying, play the ball, not the man. You know, so talk about the problem. I don't personalise it. I have found most people are willing to have a good conversation, especially, I mean, to be fair, I probably have really good friendships with men with quite good EQ who would want to have that dialogue. Yeah. And I probably dismiss the dickheads that I work with.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference, right? Is it, you know, it's hard because they often say when a problem arises, address the situation like recently to it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, you know, I can't imagine, like you throw like a girl comment or anything like that. If you're in a group of people at work and you go, hey, I really don't appreciate that language. You know, what does throw like a girl actually mean? And they're surrounded by their buddies. Yeah. I can't imagine it's going to end up in a nice place.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about choosing the moment. And as you say that, I have done that an awful lot. But I think that's, you know, the reason I do what I do in the world. I think my purpose in life is to get people to have the big conversation. So I'm not afraid of that. Yeah. I've also done a lot of training. And one of the things that I thought about is what is the key takeout from here is I would really encourage everyone to get better at crucial conversations, to show up when there's a highly emotive situation and stay in dialogue and change things, because it's really hard to do. It's a thing no one teaches you how to do. But man, it can have impact. And I think about, I was on a panel here in Christchurch, a capital raising panel, and the MC goes, oh, guys, we've got a good panel of guys for you tonight. And so when the microphone was handed to me, I was like, can I just confirm, did you mean guys as a gender inclusive term? Because it's not.
Yes.
and you know, and I say it too, and I know all of that, but I was like, there was a room full of people.
In a male-dominated environment.
Yeah, it was.
It's, again, context to the situation. And I think a lot of the time, if you bring it up in the wrong situation and you can't give a reason why, you can't articulate why, it's not okay in that context. Yeah, it becomes really hard to have that argument.
But I do think if we all felt more comfortable using our voice for ourselves, like you say, for ourselves and for the others that come around us, and I think about your colleague, the one that took on that pervy client, you know, she showed up for you.
Yeah.
And I think we should all want to do that for each other.
Yeah.
And if we have the confidence to step in and stop a situation where one of our colleagues is being treated like that, then we should absolutely do that.
Yeah.
100%. Even though it's uncomfortable.
And I think, you know, it can look very different for men and women on how they enter into that as well. Yeah. And I think what I would say for, if we have any men listening to this podcast, to one, listen. Like, actually listen to people when they're saying they're uncomfortable or this situation happened, or just because I don't see it that way, I don't believe that it happened, you know, like, actually listen. And then especially in a space of if someone is mansplaining or heap-eating. Imitating, some great words.
And again, hashtag not all men.
Yeah. But if you're in a situation where if someone in female identifying, a woman identifying person in your organisation has said, this person does this in meetings, watch it, listen, and stand there for them. Like your friend going out here, Mark going out here, you need to talk to someone with a penis. Like that is just, it feels so safe and such a good environment to be in as a woman when you know that person's there to support you in that situation. So listen and hold space and just, I think, really understand that language matters. That the words that we use fucking matter. And you're not going to get it right all the time. And I just caught myself saying the word tits up. And I'm like, wow, interesting term there. I'm going to respect that. But you're not going to get it right all of the time. But at least if you're trying to, that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. And we're undoing generations and
generations and generations of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no judgment. Like I said, we all have a degree of baked-in beliefs that don't necessarily serve us well, and if we're committed to being the best humans we can and contributing the best way we can, then leaning in and staying curious and learning is really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think too, when I think some of the roles I have now, so I sit on a couple of boards, and when I've previously been in leadership roles, I think we should all be asking, how can we be confident we're managing our teams well and our workplace is safe? Like how are we addressing this? How are we making sure the culture supports all genders equally and is truly inclusive?
Yeah, and health and safety is not just physical health and safety.
Oh yeah, no. Cool, that's a great point to wrap up, Kels. Any key takeouts from you?
Is it sexism as I don't be a dick? I think just listen to people and be kind. And if you're in one of those situations, if you don't feel comfortable speaking up for yourself, find someone in your organisation that can help you speak up with you. And if you are a male on the other side of it, like I said, listen, hold space, and be supportive, and make sure that you're checking your language sometimes. Yeah. Nice. What about you?
My key takeout is it's not okay. Let's just reiterate that. And we're talking purely about misogyny in the workplace. And there's so much more around that, around online bullying, outside of work, social events. But we just really wanted to focus on traditional work type environments. And it's just not okay. And the only way to get change is if we get more comfortable using our voices in a respectful way. And instead of taking it personally and getting upset, if we can stay in dialogue and learn how to have those tough conversations, then we can use our voice to either have a hard conversation with a colleague and ask for their help, or we can step in on behalf of a colleague to support them, or we can be the change maker. But learning to trust our voices when something feels off, I think, is going to be really important. Yeah. So that would be the takeout from me.
And I mean, from this podcast, it's terrifying for us to have this conversation as well, because we are sitting there going, we don't know everything. We don't know the best ways to talk about this thing all the time, but what we do know is that we need to share our examples of it happening to us in the workplace, because it helps other people talk about their own experiences. And so show up and have that conversation and learn from it and be open to it.
Totally. So TikTok, Kels.
Yep, so this week I have a ranty TikTok from Brianne Worth.
There's been a little bit too much fucking around and not enough finding out. To fuck around is to find out. I think Einstein said that. When the supply of finding out increases, the audacity decreases. It's simple economics. So in light of this, the high road is closed until further notice. It's time to be petty again. Consider this your official hall pass. Go absolutely feral.
So I know that's on the opposite of what we just said, but needs must sometimes, ladies.
I quite like that. Kelsey is advising all of us to go feral.
Yeah. I like the sentence, to fuck around is to find out. Yeah. Here for it. It's great. What about you? Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week is from Lynda Carter, as in the famous Lynda Carter. Life is too short to be mean to strangers online. Go outside and look at some trees.
I thought you were going to say go outside and be mean to strangers in person.
Go outside and go feral? No.
Hey, fair enough. Yep. Go outside and look at some trees. I think the world would be a better place if people just went outside and looked at some trees.
I agree.
Yeah.
So thanks again for listening in. We are releasing these episodes regularly wherever you get your podcasts. Please do subscribe, rate, and would love a 5-star rating, actually. Thank you very much. And like us on all the channels. We do love questions, stories, and topic ideas, so send them our way. Until next time, get out there, back yourself, and address misogyny when you see it.